I'm really excited about the conversation today because we have two power words in there. ROI, it's 3 words, but and culture. And we don't always put those two things together, right? And so this is going to be really fun. I want to make sure to welcome Carrie Wright. She is a consultant and coach at Wright Consulting. More importantly, Wendy F. Adams, CFRE, CEO, Cultivate for Good. Oh my gosh, one of the powerhouses in our sector. And she is on co-hosting with me today. Welcome, ladies.
Thank you.
So excited.
It's going to be a really cool conversation because I feel like, Carrie, we talk about one concept or the other, and we don't put them together. And so this is going to be a really cool way to really explore the investment that we make in our people. And I think maybe a lot of us are going to be like, wow, we're not making an investment. And so this is going to be a great way to kind of kick off maybe a new concept. What's not a new concept for us are our presenting sponsors. They stand with us day in and day out. Next week, we'll hit our 1,400th episode. And most of these folks have been with us since the beginning of our time, which is really amazing. Bloomerang, American Nonprofit Academy, Staffing Boutique, Holdings, Nonprofit Banking, Interim Executives Academy, Your Part-Time Controller, Fundraisers Friday, and JMT Consulting. They are the members of our team. I'm Julia C. Patrick, CEO of American Nonprofit Academy. And as I mentioned, Wendy F. Adams, CFRE, the CEO of Cultivate for Good. Welcome, my friend.
Thank you for the opportunity. This is going to be a blast.
It's going to be a lot of fun. Before we get started, I'm going to shamelessly pitch a new book that one of our other co-hosts, Tony Bell, and I just published. It's called The Architecture of Fundraising. And it's really a look at the profession of fundraising, how it works, when it doesn't work, and how you can build a community around yourself. If you are a professional fundraiser or you work with a professional fundraiser, it's really an accomplishment of ours, and it involves decades and decades and decades of work that we both bring to the table. So check out The Architecture of Fundraising. You can find it on Amazon. Hey, Carrie Wright, I've gotten through my spiel, my shameless plug.
Love it.
I want to welcome you to the Nonprofit Show.
Thank you. I am so glad to be here. Thank you also just for Wendy making the introduction, for us to meet together, and just also for me to be here today.
It's really a lot of fun. Talk to us about Wright Consulting. And if you want to weave in the story about how you and Wendy have worked together, that would even be better.
Oh, well, Wendy and I have a very, very curious story. I'll tell you a little bit about Wright Consulting. So I worked for 10 years in a major corporation across the United States, a fast food, quick service restaurant, if you will. And I was in executive leadership over a couple of stores and over 350 employees. And that many stories landed where COVID got us to a career alignment, a realignment, if you will, and Wright Consulting was born. So what I do is focus on business strategy meeting human potential, how to make culture changes through workplace solutions, working with teams, and really truly just investing in people and developing leaders. Now, the story about Wendy and I, that's a little bit more in depth, if you will. So Wendy and I live in the same city, and she is my ambassador for a local nonprofit organization that we're a part of. She's an active member of that. And one day she said, hey, let's have a cocoa connection. She doesn't drink coffee. And I said, sure, let's do it. And literally 4 days later, we sat down for cocoa and coffee and made just an instant connection. And we've been friends ever since. That was literally 1 year ago. And she's just been a huge confidant, a partner, running hard in the nonprofit space and the coaching space. And so we just do a lot of life together, honestly.
Nice. Really, really cool. Well, Wendy, I think that speaks, so highly of you and how you get the human condition and the human connection. And so I think this is just, you're the perfect person to chat with Carrie about this, because really what we're talking about is something that I feel we complain about, but we don't really talk about it in like, how do we think about this? So the first aspect of our conversation is kind of the assessment issue. Like, how do we determine what it is that what's going on? And I think we complain about things, but we never step back and say, what's the situation and how can we change it? I mean, is that what you're advocating, Carrie?
Absolutely. I would tell you that I think nonprofits are probably some of the hardest working organizations, but I think across the board, no matter what sector you look at, in the last 5 years, we've seen a dramatic shift in our world of work. And what we're seeing at no different paces between corporate or nonprofit, wherever you may be, is that people are leaving their jobs because of burnout, a lack of onboarding, just limited career growth, and budget constraints. Truthfully, we've got economic constraints that are impacting those, especially in the nonprofit world. And so what I'm here to do is kind of challenge, not just talking about what's the problem, what do we do to fix it, but really try to assess that and then address it, because it's truly a deeper systemic issue of what's underneath the surface. So I think especially in the world of nonprofits, we often look at them as being so missional. They're changing lives every day, but the ripple effect really starts within their own walls. Are they looking across the aisles at each other and starting with those people that they work with, the board members, the volunteers, the donors even? How are they assessing culture and addressing culture even within those spaces?
Okay, wow. Wendy, do you, so that's like at somewhat of a hair on fire moment.
Ooh, I knew you were going to go there. Absolutely.
Because I'm like listening to Carrie and I'm thinking to myself, who does this?
And why aren't we? Right? You said it earlier in the green room, right? This is a both and situation. We talk about these things independently.
Yes.
And why? It when you hear it that way, it just makes sense. So why aren't we doing it? And I'm always about the why. In this case, we're going to step into a different question in that assessment. How did we get here? How did we get here? And part of that, Carrie, you brought up is being self-aware. The leaders that have to say, okay, how am I showing up? And then what permission am I giving others to be able to show up, so we can really get into what is the culture and how did we get to this place? Then we can tie it in to what everyone wants to talk about, that return on investment. And so that both and situation is what gets me most excited about this conversation.
Well, so I'm going to make a bold statement. Okay. So I constantly will get asked by companies, hey, come in and help us with recruiting. Well, here's what I'll say. The challenge becomes you can do all the recruiting that you want. You can hire recruiting companies. You can work on your promotion, spend advertising on LinkedIn. But if you do not close the back door, then all of this effort of bringing them in is going to be completely worthwhile when they start slipping through the cracks. So again, to the question of why are we not addressing it? I would ask leaders, do you have an actual pulse on what's happening and not what they think is happening? This is a true assessment of really what's going on. So as I was in that executive leadership role, what I started to implement was, again, they asked me to oversee hiring. They asked me to implement some training and things like that. Well, what are we doing to close the back door? So I started implementing pulse check surveys every quarter. And there was one in particular question that I had on there of, give me one word or a phrase that really defines the culture in so many words. And I was always delighted when it would be family and friends. And, it means the most to me to spend time together. Those are all great things. Until one time I got a survey response back, and over and over and over, I started to see one word popping up, and it was the word click. It feels like a click. It feels like it's a click. Uh-oh, we have a problem. It's more than just assessing what the culture is and the culture of who the people are saying that the culture is, right? The people in it. It's then deciding, now what are we going to do with that problem? So then it was becoming listening to the people, bringing in a small group, having a cross-reference of those that were maybe filling out the survey and saying, and kind of getting a real heads up on, now what do we do about this problem? So you've got to do more than just say that you're listening. You've actually got to put your money where your mouth is.
Right. What a concept.
So I've got to ask this question. And Wendy, over the years, Wendy and I have talked about this in a manner, and that is, how do you speak truth to power? do you have to get somebody from the outside to come in and run this type of practice or program or analysis? Because I can't imagine the power shift of a leader saying to their team, well, how do you like it here? Right? I mean, pretty much everybody's going to be like, we love it. I mean, right? So how
Yes.
do we pierce that veil and
Yeah.
have the confidence to speak truth to power?
I do think that it starts at the top, honestly.
Okay.
And do we model what we say we believe? And do the words on the walls actually exhibit the behaviors that we implement? And that starts with leadership. The reason why I started and have a job in consulting is because other companies were saying, hey, you look like you're changing culture inside of this world of work. Will you come help us do that? And what they started to invite me in to do was to teach customer service, because they wanted their patients or their guests or their clients to be served. My question always was, wait a second, before we ever serve those on the outside of your walls, what about those on the inside? What are they saying? The minute that I was met with resistance by leaders to say, no, we're not going to do that. Well, then you got something to hide. How do we pierce that? How do we break down that barrier? It's looking a leader in the eye and saying, if you really want to impact change, if you want to leave a legacy that's worth value beyond your years here, then you'll be willing to listen to the people. And I'm not saying we're listening to all the complaints and the willy-nillys of like, well, we would rather have free food or whatever. You're not necessarily buying into all of that, but it is looking at the leaders and saying, do you really have a pulse check on what your team is saying, what your volunteers are saying, what your board members are saying, and what are you doing about that?
Asking the question, sticking around for the answer, and then let's put an action plan together that everyone speaks into.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, and here's the thing, right? Most of the time we run from that conflict. We don't want to identify that there could be possible gaps. So what ends up happening, especially in nonprofits, is we're focused on that mission, head down, we get our kind of barriers up, and now we've built silos. And instead of looking across the aisles to realize that each other are valued resources, we're comparing. Well, they don't do as much as I do. Well, I'm out on donor services. Well, they're not in the field. And now it's just this whole, running rampant idea of just judgment. And so instead of having this culture that builds on our strengths, we're really tearing each other down by the tensions that we're unwilling to address. So what I say to leaders is you can't afford not to look at this. This is so important to the value of your mission, your organization, your business, your corporation, that it is imperative for you to look at it.
It's such an interesting aspect because we're getting to the heart of personality and charisma and leadership, bias. I mean, we could go on and on and on. I want to kind of jump into that a little bit because this is somewhat of a trust exercise. When you're talking about this, I'm thinking about putting my hands across my chest and falling back into the arms of Betty from accounting and hoping that Betty catches me, right? I mean, How do we do this? Because in my experience, a lot of charismatic leaders are like, this isn't my the problem doesn't emanate from me. It's the boneheads that I have hired. And I've heard leaders say this, like, how do we navigate that leadership approach, which is very old school, and try and freshen it up and make it more so that we can talk about these things?
Yeah, that's such a wise question, because I've heard the same from leaders. And this is what I say, thoughts become things, because those thoughts breed feelings, which breed beliefs, and they turn into the behaviors that we're then as leaders saying that we accept. So then I ask the leader, well, what are you tolerating? If you're saying that you're not the problem, or this isn't starting with you, that may be true and that might be valid. But what are you allowing? And what are you tolerating by not addressing it? And so then we have to ask a deeper question, right? Like, are you willing to be the one, to be bold enough, to be the leader enough that says, hey, listen, we're not going to tolerate that anymore, because we want to close the back door. We want to take care of our people. We want to make sure that, and you can quote me on this, you will never serve your clients beyond the level of which you serve one another. And that is so ingrained and embedded into everything that I do and all of the work, whether nonprofit or for-profit. It is making sure that at the leadership level and from the bottom up and the top down, we are addressing the fact that we must serve one another first before we can ever look outside of our walls.
Okay, Wendy, do you ever hear anyone say that or recognize it?
Absolutely. But more so now more than ever. Because, and we've had a little bit of this conversation, Julia, even most recently, we have to change, right? We can't keep asking the question, why are we losing good people? And back to that return on investment, there is a huge cost to bring someone new on. And if you are constantly doing that, so the question is being asked. Again, it's that putting that mirror up and having leaders, Carrie said it so well, recognize, look, you set the tone. And it's those leaders who are saying, we can't keep doing what we're doing. There's got to be a difference that's made. There's got to be some real change that happens. Okay. And there are those who are still resistant to the fact of, yep, but you're going to be the one to set the tone until they see the change that's actually being made when they do. So yeah, this conversation is one that more are open to because they have to be.
Yeah.
Well, let me offer this challenge. Maybe someone's listening and they're not the CEO or C-level or executive level, right? And they're saying, but what it's my leader's problem. They're not on the send them the link, right? And to that person, I would say, lead from where you sit, because you still have the opportunity to make an impact to those around you. And it may not be at the top level, right? Like maybe they're not being willing to listen, being willing to have the conversation. These are called courageous conversations for a reason. They take courage because they also require action. And I would say to this person who might be sitting there and they're not at that executive level, listen, this is also about you leading from where you sit in order to be able to have an impact. And so I think that's so important to not avoid that person who may not be in the decision-making seat, but may still have the opportunity to make a difference.
Yeah.
Because leadership doesn't have to be in your title. We're influencing, right? And so well said.
Yeah, I love that, because that was going to be kind of my next thought to explore was, yeah, okay, but I'm not the CEO or I'm not even, a manager, but I'm seeing this. What do I do? I love that, because it also seems to me that that's an excellent way to cultivate next gen leaders. Getting them on the road to behaving and really addressing a type of methodology and philosophy, so that as they mature, or the organization matures, whatever, we're cultivating and bubbling up leadership that can understand this.
Yeah,
and that's the culture of philanthropy, right? Like we talk about it, that just made it so real. That's what that looks like.
Yeah, that's really, really true.
Yeah, and I know you've had lots of conversations on the different generations, how that impacts donors, how that impacts nonprofits, right? And I would say, let's have that conversation internally, because you've got next gen leaders that are on your team right now, or they're coming onto your team. And we need to be willing to have those conversations. Wendy talks about this all the time with emerging leaders and what we're doing for that reverse mentoring opportunities and modeling the behavior that they want to see, that their time is spent on something that's actually going to have value and have impact. Let's just not put words on walls and say it's a mission statement. Let's make sure that we do what we say we value.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely.
It's really an interesting thing, Wendy, to have this philosophical discussion and really understand how it impacts us beyond this is a nice thing to do, and really flipping the script and saying this is an essential thing to do. So we don't have a lot of time left, but I really want to spend our last remaining moments with the practical aspect. Like, what are things that we can do so that we can engage this conversation and even point it out. I think, Wendy, you and I have talked about this before as well. There's a lot of complaining going on.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. A lot of, okay, this is so bad. How do we change it? Well, we've got to have, first of all, the right people around the table. We can't keep having the same voices. We've got to make sure we've got this cross across the board, who are being affected, who are a part of this stakeholder list that we're talking about. Make sure they're at the table so their voices are heard.
Yeah. Really
Yeah, I would give you a couple of things that I think are just practical steps, right? And we talked about this really in the first part of assessing, making sure that you are taking an honest look at truly what is going on. This should be in the form of you can do a Gallup poll, you can do your own made up survey. I do recommend objective ones, obviously, anonymous ones, especially. And the reason why is because you want to create a safe space where they feel that they trust and can give their honest feedback, and then decide what you're going to do with that. So really assessing that has to be rule number one, and then addressing what comes up out of those survey results. What are you getting as feedback from the pulse checks? And now what are you going to do about it? You may find that you need to start building bridges and tearing down silos. What does that look like? Well, you can't do that overnight, right? And so it's kind of this whole analogy of it takes water 212 degrees to boil. And when that water hits 200 degrees, you're just kind of waiting for it. And every single little inch further, every single degree further until it finally hits 212 is when it's going to boil, right? And so you've got to establish a culture that truly embodies we do what we say we value. We are the words on the wall. We live out our mission. And so while you're assessing it, you're addressing it, you're tearing down the silos and building the bridges, you're also following it up with really, truly embodying that culture. Here's the last thing I'll say about that. You've got to embed culture into an ongoing strategy. So when you think about from a nonprofit standpoint, you're looking at 2026 and you're planning out your events and your donor strategy and maybe your direct mail and all the things that you're going to do to cultivate those donors and to be able to fundraise. Don't forget that the culture of your team is the most important part, because as we're out there, cultivating these donors and relationships with people that we're asking to invest in our organization, are we also equally invested in the people of our organization?
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Wonderful to give someone a piece of swag. Do they even want to wear it outside of the doors? Right? Are they willing to be that ambassador? So well said. If we're not investing internally, that is going to be a direct effect externally.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
go ahead.
I'm not a gardener. I kill succulents. Wendy knows this about me. we ask us about our kefir journey. Okay. So anyway, but you cannot grow an organization where you're not willing to tend the soil. And so some of this is going to take work. You're going to have to plow the ground. You're going to have to plant the seed. You're going to have to water it. You're going to have to provide enough light, but not too much. And then you're going to have to weed it. And it's going to be laborious. Yeah. And also it's going to be worth it, because eventually what we're doing is we're creating a healthy enough system, a healthy enough soil for the root system to grow so that we can truly support the fruit of organizational health.
And be okay for the self-select, because there's pruning that's going to happen, right? Yeah. So we've got to be okay in that space.
So how long should we plan on this taking?
In terms of cultural change?
Yeah, because I'm a gardener and I'm a big gardener, and things take years.
They take time.
Years. And there's a lot of frustration before you sit down at the dinner table and enjoy the fruits of your labor. And sometimes you never get to do that.
Sometimes you never get to do that.
Yeah. How do we mitigate that?
How do you mitigate that? Well, Wendy just brought up a great point. And I hadn't thought about this, but there are going to be self-selects. There's going to be pruning. There might be some terminations. There might be people who choose to leave on their own. That's all going to be painful. But if you really are waiting for the fruit to be able to enjoy that, then are you willing to put the time and the effort in? It will not be overnight. It will not be. But it's 1 degree at a time, right? So how long will it take? I have watched organizations change in as little as 6 to 9 months, a little bit at a time. And some of that is when the leadership is bought in and when it's being modeled appropriately and effectively. It doesn't mean that everything changed all at once, but I have watched that be able to make transformation inside teams and organizations, even just in as little as 6 to 9 months. Doesn't mean it's all going to change. It will, in fact, be a long growth process, but it is definitely worth the outcome.
Interesting.
And we have to recognize and speak out, Carrie, you said it, that we're going to have conversation along the way. Courageous, hard, to give safe spaces for people to say, that didn't feel good. Or I know we're moving in a direction, but boy, that was hard. Yes, let's have and create those spaces. So as we're going through this laborious process, we can talk about how that it was hard to see so-and-so go, or to make this change, or let's have those spaces. That's what keeps people bought in. They're a part of the process.
So
yes,
Wendy,
and that can be hard. I'm sorry, Julia.
no, let me just ask Wendy really quickly then. So I hear you saying we need to keep reminding our team that we're on this journey and we're in this process, right? It's not
Absolutely.
a poster on the wall. It's got to be like, we're working this.
We're working it. It's part of the conversation. It's in our meetings. I mean, it's much like our strategic planning, right? We don't just put that in and it's in a document somewhere. We've got to have those opportunities constantly, and that people know. I can raise my hand and say, hey, this seems like we're actually veering off. We talk about the drift. Let's just know that when we start this, we've got to keep that door open. We have to keep these conversations going, and we've got to keep saying we're doing this together. So if you don't feel bought in, please raise your hand. Let's have that conversation and know that it is a safe space to be able to do. That's the only way we actually move forward.
Yeah, I think one of the things that I'm so often trying to teach teams and leaders is that clarity is kindness. And if we're not stating this is in fact the direction that we're going, we can't do this behind the scenes. This can't be in closed doors and in board meetings where we don't actually communicate, because people will react and they will revolt to that. But clarity is kindness. When we communicate our stated expectations, when we clarify with clear communication that this is the direction we're going, and then we invite them both to be joined in on the process and a pivotal part of that process, to be voices that we actually listen to and that we acknowledge, hey, that's a great idea, but we can't do that right now, and here's why. And when we invite that kind of courageous conversation, we're willing to be able to say, we're in this for the long haul. We're going to change the culture, and we're going to be invested not only in what this organization is setting out to do, but also in you as our team.
Absolutely. Real stakeholder at that point, not just something to be said. They know they're a stakeholder at that point.
Ownership. Yes.
I love clarity is kindness. I'm going to write that down when I get back into my office. Because that to me is like an incredible message. An incredible message. It just means that we're going to all be rowing hopefully in the same direction, and going back to Wendy's comment, with the why, understanding why we're doing this, as opposed to just top down, this is what you're going to do.
That's right.
Which doesn't always track as well. So, really interesting. Wow. Carrie, this has been great. What a pleasure to have both you and Wendy on together. I can see how you've hit it off. Really interesting concepts. I found it very refreshing and very doable, right? It wasn't just like, so sometimes we have these conversations and they're just like, yeah, in a perfect world. I mean, but this was, I think, very something that you could navigate and achieve, right?
It's applicable, right? Yeah, anyone. Oh, I get that. I see that. We can do this. And it's a we. It's a we.
That's right. I appreciate that, Julia. I am strategic by nature, and this is what I am both passionate about and I feel gifted at doing and helping teams do. It's not just going in with some flowery language, but really giving them the nuts and the bolts and the tools to be able to just truly have healthy organizations and just powerful teams that are working together to make a difference.
Yeah, I love it. Well, really exciting. You just gave me some really great ideas and confidence and the thought that this can be done. It's not just something to talk about, but it can actually become a living, breathing task and mission that we look at internally. So Carrie Wright, she's a consultant and coach with Wright Consulting. You can learn more about Carrie and her work at wrightconsulting.com and really explore what this might mean to your organization and your own leadership style, which is just so critical in the nonprofit sector. What's also critical for us is that we have these amazing presenting sponsors. They include Bloomerang, American Nonprofit Academy, Staffing Boutique, Holdings Nonprofit Banking, Interim Executives Academy, Your Part-Time Controller, Fundraisers Friday, and JMT Consulting. Ladies, this was great. Thank you very much.
Thank you. This was a wonderful conversation. Thank you just for being willing to have it. It's needed across all workforces and nonprofit world. And I just appreciate you giving me the opportunity to share.
Yeah, a lot of fun, a lot of fun. Wendy, I'm thinking about myself, of course.
Yeah.
And I'm like, I need to think about some of these things that Carrie talked about. So,
And that's what makes you an excellent leader, because you started with you.
I don't know. Now I'm just like, oh, I missed the boat in the dock many times. But as we end each and every episode, we leave with this mantra. And again, I'm thinking about myself, big shock. But it goes like this: to stay well so you can do well.